Hi, welcome to a training video on how to properly operate the Kenwood TS450S sideband station at Whiskey 1 November Radio Golf located at the Wallingford EOC. Assuming power has been applied to the Kenwood transceiver and associated equipment, this video will instruct you how to properly operate in sideband mode with or without the Ameritron 811H amplifier. Rob, w1nrg, will be showing us how to make adjustments and settings, but first let's familiarize ourselves with the transceiver key buttons and switches that you'll be using when operating the station. First we will go through the Kenwood transceiver, also known as the exciter, and next we will go through the external antenna tuner, which is a 10-tech, the external amplifier, which is the Ameritron 811H, an AB switch that's wall mounted right behind the amplifier, and the voice keyer, which is setting on top of the Kenwood exciter. To start with, the two button group near the phone jack are of interest. The button to the upper left of the phone jack is the send receive button. When this button is depressed, the rig is in transmit mode, and when the button is undepressed or out, the rig is in RX mode. To the upper right of the phone jack is the auto tuner button. When this button is depressed, the tuner is on, and when it's not depressed or out, the tuner is in bypass mode. When the tuner is on, the number 4 button on the keypad is used to match the rig impedance to the attached antenna. As a note, the internal tuner will not tune on 160 meters. This cluster of buttons should be very self-explanatory. The upper sideband and lower sideband, you'll control that depending on which band you're operating on. The CWFSK button, Rob will be describing how to use that when using the external amplifier. And of course there's the tuning knob, that should be very self-explanatory. Next to the last lower right knob on the front panel is power. Fully clockwise, this gives maximum power output or 100 watts. When it's fully counterclockwise, it gives you minimal power or 5 watts roughly output. Rob will be describing its use, especially when using the external amplifier. Roughly to the 1 o'clock position of the power knob is the AF and RF knobs. The AF knob is the internal knob, and fully counterclockwise is no audio output, and fully clockwise is full audio output. The RF knob or gain is the external or exterior part of that knob, and when fully clockwise you're using all your RF gain, and when you've got it fully counterclockwise it's basically squelched. That pretty much covers what we wanted to go over of the buttons that you'll really be using quite a bit of when operating in sideband mode on the Kenwood. Now we'll go into details on the amplifier. This is the Ameritron 811H 800 watt external amplifier. The key operational areas of this amplifier are the band switch. This must match the band the Kenwood or exciter is transmitting on. The load and plate adjustment knobs. These are used in conjunction with each other. The 3 toggle switches from left to right: meter function, standby operate, power on off, and finally the meters. This is the 10-tech external antenna tuner. This device or equipment is used whenever the external amplifier is used and whenever you aren't using the Kenwood internal antenna tuner, like when you're operating on 160 meters. There's a lot of knobs and switches on this device, but it's pretty straightforward and used in conjunction with the external SWR power meter. We will not be referring to or using the meter that's on this unit, as it's less accurate than the external SWR power meter. The capacitor and inductor knobs are the 2 major components to tune the antenna to the amplifier or Kenwood transceiver. Charts are printed out for operational starting points, which point you to the initial settings of these 2 large knobs and the setting of the low Z, high Z center switch. When using the internal Kenwood tuner and not using the external amplifier, this switch must be set to the bypass mode. Finally, the antenna selector switch must be set correctly. The antenna 1 switch position is the G5RV antenna at the EOC, and the number 4 position is the dummy load. Common mistakes is keeping the dummy load position set, as you can still receive in this position and hear folks, and if you transmit, they may hear you too. But if you want to make some QSOs, set it to the number 1 position so you're using the antenna. This is the external power meter, and you'll be using this to determine if the amplifier is tuned correctly for power settings and such. Rob will go into details on this. The only switch on this box that you have to maintain in the right position, and that's the meter power setting. It's either got to be set to 200 or 2000 watts, and Rob will go into details on that.
Okay, to shut off the antenna, if you're going to be using the amplifier and the tuner, you got to shut off auto. Right now it's engaged, so that means I'm on 40 meters, I'm on bypass, I press AT tune, and it tunes all by itself. That's tuned to the antenna and loading out properly. You can transmit now.
And you're not using the amplifier.
And you're not using the amplifier, that's correct. But we want to use the amplifier because we're contesting. You have to shut it off. So now here's where you got to be very careful about that. You shut off auto tune, which is fine. The next thing you should do is come over here to the power control and turn that down to minimum. That will allow you to put out minimum wattage and not damage the finals while you're trying to tune the antenna tuner.
And on the amplifier, to put the amplifier in bypass, it's
yes, the first thing you want to check is after you've set up the exciter, which is the Kenwood, you want to make sure that this button here, this transmit, is not in operate but is in standby. Right now it is in standby.
And that's basically bypasses the amplifier.
That's correct. You're not engaging the transmit relay inside the amplifier. You're going straight to the tuner. So what we want to do is try to tune up 40 meters.
With the amplifier and bypass, we're not using the tuner.
No, with the amplifier and bypass, we're not using the amplifier. We are using the tuner.
So we're using the tuner. And how does the auto tuner come into play on the Kenwood when you've got this tuner in the mix as well?
Okay, so if you just want to use 100 watts, let's say you got a bunch of guys out there that you can hear them really good, they can hear you. You want to use the internal tuner on the Kenwood. The tuner here has to be in bypass. So we're not using the capacitor nor the inductors inside the tuner to try to match the antenna to the rig.
It becomes a piece of wire.
It's just yeah, it's exactly right. It goes through here, comes through here, and goes right to the meter and then out to the antenna.
So the antenna tuner right now, because it's in bypass, we're using the Kenwood antenna tuner.
Right.
But now you've shut the antenna tuner off on the Kenwood, and now you'd have to use the antenna tuner on this thing.
Yeah, you have to use one or the other.
One or the other.
One or the other, because it's a G5RV, so it doesn't load out perfectly on any band.
Right.
You have to use one or the other. So right now we're just trying to set up using the amplifier. The other thing is, after you've done this to the Kenwood, you want to make sure that your antenna switch back here and behind the amplifier is actually set to this rig and not that rig. And you just kind of have a general indication. If the arrow is pointed this way, it's pointing to that rig. So we need to put this over all the way on this one, which is E, pointing to this rig.
Got it.
You can see that there's only two coaxes. This coax goes to this rig, that coax goes to that rig.
So E is sideband, and the other one is CW.
About 10 watts right now. Our antenna selector is over on sideband rig. What we want to do is grab this chart. As you can see, it says tuner setup. We're on the 40 meter band on the Excite 7137. So for this we're going to start on the 40 meter setting, which are these three settings here. And these three settings correspond to these three controls. Just like that. So the capacitor, that's going to be at 0 or thereabouts. That's where we're going to start. High Z1, which is high impedance setting number 1. High impedance setting number 1. And for 40 meters, we're going to use 6.0 millihenries on the inductor. So this one is a multi-turn knob. You're going to have to use the crank if you're far off. So we're just going to start at 6. This is a good starting position. The other thing you're going to have to know is which antenna are we using here. Right now, setting number 4, as you can see here, is pointing to the dummy load. We want that on antenna number 1, which is the only true antenna we have, the G5RV. So you have to make sure that the antenna switch is actually on G5RV. And I made this mistake. When you're on the dummy load, you can actually receive signals and people can actually hear you. And you transmit into the dummy load. It happens. So, but that's much better. I don't 200 watts because we're only going to be using the Excite
Off the Kenwood.
for 100 watts. Afterwards, when we're trying to tune this up, you're going to have to switch that over to 2000. We've got minimal power down here. We don't need to be worried about any of the other settings except for this. Let's turn it up. We got somebody on here, so we want to get off of that. Busy band tonight. But what we have to do to try to set this up is to put this in CW mode, since we need a constant carrier to engage the output. And what I do is, I'll come over here and put my finger on the send receive switch right above my fingernail. Send is in, receive is out. So if you send it, and as you can see, if you look over at the SWR bridge, it says a reading of 5 to 1. Now we're only putting out about 10 watts, so it's not going to hurt anything, but we're going to have to adjust that. So the first thing I try to do, I'll put my fingers on the capacitor, and I'll just keep turning it until I get a dip, and that's my dip right there. And I'll give the transistors a minute just to relax and not saturate. I'll rekey it, and then I'll try the inductor. And all I want to do is I want to dip it. So the more I turn now, I'm pretty much minimal right there. So I'll give it a rest. Come back to the rig. And I'll turn the power up about 1/3. That's going to give me 20 to 30 watts out. Next time I hit the send button, I'll be ready with my hands on the inductor and capacitor to try to further dip it. So you have to increase power slowly when you're trying to tune the tuner. Otherwise it's just too difficult to manage and you don't want to ruin anything as you go along. Okay, so I'm going to key the transmitter. I'm just going to dip the capacitor, which is right about there, and I'm going to dip the inductor. That's right about there. It's about as dipped as it's going to get. My power is about, like I said, 25-30 watts. So now I'm going to go up to 2/3 power, about 70 watts. Check the setting, and it's pretty flat on the SWR. And yeah, I'm only about 50 watts right now. So let's go up to 100 and make sure we're fully dipped. We're at 100 watts. We're fully dipped. Okay, the tuner is set for the band and the conditions on the antenna right now. Okay, sorry guys. So the first thing you do when you're going to go to engage the amplifier is you're going to reduce power down to minimal, below the setting that you originally had it when you were doing the adjusting the tuner. So you just want it just slightly above, so you're 5 or 10 watts at the most. You leave it in CW mode, that's all ready to go. Pardon me. We had this on tuner setup. Now we've got this on amplifier setup. So we know we're on the 40 band mode, right? So we got to set the band switch, which is this column here, to 40 meters. The load setting is 3 to 3.5. So we'll put it right between 3 and 3.5, which is right about there. The plate setting for 40 meters is going to be 8. So you want that cranked up about 8. And the band switch, like you said, this is just a double check, is 40 meters. You got to make sure that that's actually set properly. Not in these instructions, but what I always try to do is I check the high voltage. That's proper, or 1.7 kV.
Yep.
That's proper plate voltage. So, here's where the rubber meets the road. You push this on a transmit instead of standby. Now, because we have a cable that's attached from this rig to that rig, when I key this, it'll close a contact in the exciter, the transmitter, which will also cause a relay in here to engage and engage the amplifier, the tubes inside of this rig. The last thing you need to do is put this on 2,000 watts, because this is an 800 volt or 800 watt amplifier. So if everything's loaded out properly, you'll probably get very close to that amount. Remember, keep your power down to minimum during this phase at the initial set. So we're going to engage it. You only want to engage it for a few seconds at a time, up to maybe 3-5 seconds, and then you give the outputs a rest. The first part, what we're going to do is after I press the transmit switch, I'm going to come over here to the plate, and again I'm going to watch the settings on this meter and this meter and that meter and dip it. Dipping means maximum output, minimum SWR. So right now you're adjusting basically how the load looks to the transmitter, and you're matching those up. So here we go. Okay, plate current is 300 milliamps, grid current is 25, which is good. Got about 50 watts out. So you see how the SWR, the power is going up? You see how I'm dipping that? That's what you want, maximum right there. So the plate is now adjusted. We went from 50 watts to 100 watts just adjusting the plate setting. The next thing we're going to be watching is the grid current and the plate current. We've got this dipped so we know that our plate setting is proper. We're going to increase a little bit of drive, not very much, probably less than 30%. And we're going to, pardon me, we're going to adjust the plate again to make sure we're fully dipped, and we don't want to exceed 100 milliamps on grid current, and we don't want to be in the red on the plate current, which is about 700 milliamps. So if you're approaching those limits, that's your limit for this band. No matter which band you're on, whether you're on 40 or 10 or 160, once you start dipping this and you get above 100 or 700 milliamps on the plate current, that's your maximum. Basically from that point I would just reduce the power output a little bit so that you're not approaching maximum. So let's try it. Okay, my left hand is on power, and I'm going to increase power so that we get 100 milliamps right there. We can see our plate current is less than 600, and right now we're getting about 650 watts out of the amplifier. Let's give the outputs a rest. If you look over here, the power setting on the Excite is just about 50%. So you're driving 50 watts into the amplifier to get well over 500 watts out of it. As a final adjustment in here, and we're very close to that, you can actually drive grid current up to 200 milliamps on sideband mode. CW mode, we would leave it right where it's at. Digital mode, RIDI, PSK, you would leave it right where it's at. And now we're going to do it. 100 milliamps, let's dip it. Okay, yeah, just a little bit of an adjustment there. We dipped it a little bit better. And we're going to increase that to 200. We are fully dipped. This is nowhere near 700, so we're good to go there. We disengage, and now this is fully tuned. Let's try it one more time and check the reading on the power meter. Yeah, you're getting a full 800 watts out of here. Full 800 watts. That's fully tuned on 40 meters. The amplifier will fully tune 20 meters. 15 meters, you're only going to get about 600 watts out of it. 10 meters, probably 400. 80 meters, you will get about 500 or 600 watts out, and 160, you will get about 600 or 700 watts out of it.
Now, is that because of the antenna, or is that just the nature of the amplifier?
It's because we got this device in here right now. This is warm right now.
Yeah.
So this is,
That's consuming power.
you're dumping a little bit of power into the coils on this rig, but it's also causing a good match and allowing the most amount of power go to your antenna.
Yeah, you don't have a resonant antenna.
That's correct.
On any of the frequencies.
Yeah, you're
Okay, so this is the keyer, the voice keyer that's at the top of the Kenwood. And you need to have that on when you use it, but you don't have to.
You don't have to use it.
Right. Everything plugs into that, and the voice keyer is then plugged into the Kenwood, right?
That's correct.
So when you want to take and plug in, when you want to plug in
That's my.
the headset, you plug the headset basically into the keyer.
That's correct.
If you want to use the mic, you plug the mic into.
Yeah. Pull that out,
Pull that out. You plug that into.
and you put the microphone right in. Screw it in.
There, and then that's in.
Of course, you have to screw it down.
Yeah, screw it down, and then then push to talk would be here. But when you're using the headset that's plugged into the when you plug it into the MFJ, this has a foot switch, and that's what this plug here is. So this plug, this gray colored one, goes down to the foot switch that's on the floor. So now you can operate with the headset on, foot switch is operating push to talk. You got your boom microphone, and if you're a touch typist, you can operate pretty much. You don't need somebody to log for you. You can do it all yourself. Well, hopefully this video was instructional. A little bit longer than I wanted it to be, but take a look through this and review it again if you have any questions. 73.